Why PBL by Jody Butts and Emily Koval.
The goal of project-based learning is to create authentic learning with real-world application for students, to have students acknowledge and attempt to solve a real-world problem. The big point is to create a public project that lends itself to the authenticity of learning for the students. In Mrs. Butt's 12th grade participation in government class, our project, A Voice for Change, students identified and researched something that they perceived as a problem. In pairs, they had to find statistics and create surveys to back up their hypothesis. Then, armed with real-world data, they were tasked with trying to inform and influence public opinion. Some students picked serious topics, like prescription drug abuse, drunk driving, and the use of racial slurs, while others chose the quality of student lunches and the conditions of high school bathrooms. All the groups had to create a 30 to 60 second PSA that was shown to their peers and ran on a loop in the high school library.
The color today is gray.
This is a segment of a PSA on bullying done by a very quiet, unassuming student. As you can imagine, our reactions were powerful. As a teacher, it was great to see students complete tasks like research, create questionnaires, and analyze data. However, I think the real learning came about as we watched the PSAs and realized that these were public problems, but they were really issues that each of us had experience with. The people we know are negatively impacted by a behavior that some of us take part in. The goal of my PBL was to open my students' eyes to the world around them, and I think seeing their classmates put themselves out there and discuss issues that they really had did that.
Mrs. Koval's 6th grader science. Our project-based learning was, why should we care and learn about rocks enough to actually want to buy one? So what I've noticed in my 3 years of teaching earth science is that the students love to identify rocks and want to bring you in rocks, but they don't really understand how we use them in the real world. So the goal of this PBL was the students learn about a specific rock, all of its properties, where it's formed and how it's formed, and then tell me how do we use it in the real world. And that's how they're going to convince us that we'd actually spend our hard-earned money to actually buy a rock. To launch my PBL, the students went on a journey, a rock walk, and they saw 6 igneous rocks and they saw 5 metamorphic rocks. And they had to choose 2 of each. What are the highest 2 igneous rocks that they're the most interested to learn and research, and what were the 2 highest metamorphic rocks? And after going on their rock walk, the students then completed a Google form and identified what rock do you want to sell. So the students had to complete this. They had to identify what igneous rock interests you the most, what igneous rock interests you the second most, and then do the same thing for metamorphic rocks. And then I also included, did you want to work by yourself or with a partner, so that the students were able to work in a comfortable environment. Based on the survey results, the students were able to get a first choice rock, whether it was igneous or metamorphic, and then began working with their partner or by themselves on the Explain Everything app. Before really beginning to research their rock, though, the students had to learn about minerals, which are the building blocks of rocks. And so we did in-class flips, so the students learned all the properties of minerals. Then we worked on their rock presentation on identifying the properties of their rock, the hardness, the luster, the color, etc. Then after working and identifying all the properties of their rock, the students then had an in-class flip on igneous rocks, because some of the students were researching igneous rocks. So they had to learn about the process that forms igneous rocks, where are they formed, how are they used in the real world, such as that. And then they were given 3 more build days to work on their PBL video. Now, currently, the students are working on their metamorphic rock. They just finished their flip for metamorphic rock, so they learned what forces formed them, where they're formed, and how they're used in the real world. And now we're building, for those students that are researching the metamorphic rocks, their videos. As the students were building after each of those flips, the minerals, the igneous, and the metamorphic flips, the students would be working on their presentation for their specific rock. And I would pull the students over and we would look at their presentation thus far. And we'd go through this checklist. Do I have all the physical properties? Color, luster, streak, texture, cleavage or fracture, hardness. Metamorphic rocks, they need to tell me if it was foliated or non-foliated. Some of them even went above and beyond and told me the density, also telling me if it's buoyant or its magnetism. Igneous rocks had to tell me which substance really formed them. What minerals build their rock, or what other substances are there, like anthracites built by coal and plant debris. Metamorphic rocks, after the flip, they really understood parent rocks, and that igneous rocks could be the parent rock, or sedimentary rocks could be the parent rock of their metamorphic rock. And then they had to describe in detail the processes that formed their rock. Some students went above and beyond and found videos from YouTube to insert into their own video that explained these processes. And then last but not least, the big sell. They have to tell us, how is that rock used in the real world? The more ways you have to use it in the real world, the more convinced our audience will be to actually spend our money on buying this rock. So this is how we made sure that the students had all of their requirements. From this PBL, my students really learned how to work with each other. They learned how to research and how to phrase things to learn about their specific rocks and what information they needed to find. The students really learned how their specific rock was formed. And then the big part was, how do we actually use rocks around us in the real world for purpose? And I think that goal was definitely met.